So, have you ever wondered what is going to happen to Eddie Hearn when, let's say, the Beterbiev and the Bivol fight end? Obviously, right now, when you are watching this, it is the Friday, 24 hours just before the fight between Beterbiev and Bivol. Eddie Hearn has lost Anthony Joshua during the Dubois fight, and prior to that, Eddie Hearn has lost a shutout, a 5-on-5 series with Queensberry. So now you got to ask yourself, where is Eddie Hearn going to be when and if Arthur Beterbiev defeats Bivol tomorrow? Well, I can give you a couple of conclusions. Number one, in all honesty, he's not going anywhere. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, because that is the main topic at hand, is where Eddie Hearn is going to be if and when he loses against Bivol tomorrow. That's the first topic. The second topic is UFC news. In particular, the 135 division. Merab is the current champion right now, has defeated Sean O'Malley. But we got to ask, where is Umar Nurmagomedov and Merab in this picture right now? Because they are projected to be the next fight any day now, any time. They're going to sign the fight on the dotted line between Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov. Well, the problem is the promotion. What are they going to do with them? How are they going to promote it? Because you're talking about two guys that are not exactly marketable. Let's just be honest about it. The numbers don't suggest that they are marketable. The engagement with them is not really all there. Let's just be honest about it, right? Like, Merab has this social media influencer thing going on where he does these stupid little dances with these random women, and then he does all these little skits and this and that. Like, I don't think it's clicking. I always say this, right? Merab is the non-Muslim version of a Dagestani. I always say that, and I say that about Georgians. Georgians are just like Dagestanis, except they're not Muslim. Okay? Georgians are a lot like Dagestanis, but they are not Muslim. So what am I trying to tell you? Well, this is exactly what I'm trying to tell you. What I'm trying to tell you is that they come from two different sets of worlds. But they're the same type of people. So in other words, one is Muslim, one is not. Maybe Christian, Orthodox, perhaps Catholic at times, although unlikely, but more so on the Eastern Orthodox Christianity side of things, within that particular sectarian. Right there, right? They are a different culture than that of Muslims, which means they are free to do all these ridiculous skits that they do online, whereas most Muslim men would not succumb to such embarrassment or such foolish satire. Yes, that's really what it is. Like, if you really want to look into the Islamic Orthodox way of thinking, let's just be honest about this. Comedy is a useless endeavor. It really is. There will never be a serious Muslim, no pun intended, there will never be a serious Muslim that is going to be serious enough about comedy. The irony of those words that I just said. But yes, not to get off topic, Merab is still seen as a Dagestani. And that is why none of this is hitting whatsoever. That's the God honest truth. So all these skits that he does or this and that, he's not some bonehead Southern California surfer / skater dude. Because if you were that guy, then it sticks. All right, it makes sense why you're doing all of these foolish pranks and these stupid skits. It makes sense. But to people, it's not clicking because they compare him to a Dagestani, and as a result, it just looks like he's faking the funk. He's trying too hard for social media. That's really what we're witnessing here. You understand? So that is what's going on. So now, he becomes very difficult to market. But what about Umar Nurmagomedov? Is he easy or hard to market? I'm going to say he's easy. Think about it. Look at his last name. You look up his last name, it is synonymous, obviously, with Khabib. That's hot in the algorithm. Anything that you type on Google or on YouTube with Khabib, that is absolutely red hot on the algorithm. However, what if you are just a relative? I think the name holds the same. Usman Nurmagomedov holds a big following because of that. Obviously, Islam being a long-time student, and Khabib is now the head trainer, coming from the school of Abdul Manap. It's all easy to market. But Merab, not so much. But them together, it's even harder. But speaking of harder, right now, today, Chris Eubank Jr. is very difficult to market. You want to know why? The reason within the difficulty of trying to promote Chris Eubank, who, by the way, is also fighting against that Polish guy tomorrow. He got into that little scuffle with Conor Benn. Okay, Conor Benn looked very upset because for all this time he's been accused of being a roid head and obviously very distraught at the fact that he was not able to get the fight together. But that's neither here or there. Now they are here where Chris Eubank is fighting tomorrow and Conor Benn at any time is ready to fight again. But why is it getting harder to promote Chris Eubank? He's not giving us the fights that we want. And right now, the Saudis are the major facilitators of any fights that anybody wants at literally at a cost of an unlimited amount of treasury. And they're willing to put any of those on. So why is it that we can't Chris Eubank versus Canelo? Well, there's politics that are involved in that. Canelo obviously has a lot of politics going on against Turki El-Sheikh. What about Hamza Shiraz? Well, Hamza Shiraz is close with the Sheikh, close with Saudi Arabia, and so as the Eubank family, and in particular, Chris Eubank. So what is the problem? For whatever reason, he does not want to pull the trigger on Hamza Shiraz because, quite frankly, he's a very bad stylistic matchup for him. You see, Chris Eubank likes to throw a lot of combinations, a lot of hooks, a lot of uppercuts, close range shots, almost sort of like a Mexican style, but with the hybrid of, let's say, the strong British man style, where you got your hands up very high, very technical, and very basic. Okay, that is the typical British style mixed with the Mexican close range hooks, uppercuts, and power shots in close range type of fighting. So that is a bad matchup for Chris Eubank because Hamza Shiraz can do that a little bit better, if not taller and longer and rangier, and using the range if he needs to. On top of that, has a jab that feels like an absolute brick attached to a stick when it hits you. So he's a bad matchup. So in turn, it becomes very difficult to market somebody like Chris Eubank. But I tell you what, let's get to the next story, and the main event of this story, obviously, is Eddie Hearn. I noticed that during the pre-fight press conference, maybe a couple of weeks ago, way before fight week, Chris Eubank called out Frank Warren for not paying the fighters the way that they should. But he didn't really mention Eddie Hearn in a negative light. The only negativity that he ever had to mention about Eddie Hearn was, guess what? About the steroid scandal that dealt with Conor Benn. And in Eddie Hearn's defense, how was he supposed to know? How is he supposed to know that it was not okay to let the fight go? Because look, you got to understand something, right? The commissions are there for a reason. The promoters are there to make a fight happen. They can't just stop a fight at their own dime and on top of that lose out on a huge amounts of money that they could have made. Okay? Or not made if they just decided to totally pull the plug on the whole operation, the whole event. So can you really blame Eddie Hearn? Well, the answer is that's for you to decide as an audience, because to your own discretions are going to vary, and your own moral standings and principles are also going to vary due to the circumstances that are around you. So, in other words, let me put this in layman's terms. I cannot judge a man for the decisions that they make, especially when there are big money deals on the line and there's just so much pressure to not pull out. But guess what? That's why the commissions are there. As a result, they pulled the whole fight altogether. You guys remember that. That whole entire card was scrapped. And I remember it was the same day, I believe, as a UFC. I'm not sure if I do remember if it was just a fight night, a big fight night, or a big pay-per-view. But nonetheless, whatever was happening that day was probably a lot more exciting than the fact that Chris Eubank and Conor Benn's fight got scrapped. So now they got an opportunity to make it, which leads me to the next topic at hand with Eddie Hearn. Where does he go from here if he loses with his fighter tomorrow in the main event with Bivol and Arthur Beterbiev? Well, the answer is this. He still has fights going on. Conor Benn is still there. That's still a big fight. He's obviously going to be taken out of the championship positions because the Anthony Joshua fight was an obvious championship fight, IBF vacant from Usyk. And as a result, what is the next heavyweight champion that Eddie Hearn has? Well, Anthony Joshua's the only hope right now, but they have a rematch clause. So he's still in the game. He's still in the game with Conor Benn. He's still in the game with having that rematch clause from Anthony Joshua and Dubois. But weirdly enough, there is no rematch clause between Bivol and Arthur Beterbiev. So the winner of that fight goes on and advances in their career, and the other one just goes and fights whoever is on the bottom to sort of gatekeep the undisputed championship. Right? In other words, you're going to be fighting the number 2, number 3 guys in the world, and then if they beat you, if they beat you, then they advance and fight another person for a title eliminator. That type of deal. So you would be demoted into a semi-finals contender fighter. I'm talking about Bivol and Arthur Beterbiev. So that's where Eddie Hearn is at the 175 division. What about the heavyweight division? I just mentioned Anthony Joshua. Does he have other heavyweights in the mix? Well, the answer is no, because right now it's either Dubois or Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, and Alexander Usyk is still the unified champion and the lineal champion at the heavyweight division. Him going into that fight with Tyson Fury in December 21st. So what else would be left for Eddie Hearn? It would be the Conor Benn and the Chris Eubank fight, which ironically has nothing to do with any championship fights, but more like a glam fight, more like a settle the grudge generational fight, because both of their fathers fought each other in one of the biggest British boxing events during their time in the 1980s. And now they're rekindling that beef between the Benn family and the Eubank family. So that's what Eddie Hearn has going on. That's what Eddie Hearn has at stake in terms of what is up for him and what his fights are going to be in terms of the promotion that they're going to make after the Bivol and the Arthur Beterbiev fight. So, I want to end it with this. I want to end it with what Eddie Hearn had mentioned to Kugan Cassius a long time ago, which I think really matters most. Because we are in a world where we have this constant pursuit of excellence at all costs and at all times. The problem with that is sometimes we really have to come to grips with the reality that we're not going to reach those goals. So what do? You go for a plan B. And with that plan B, maybe there's a better opportunity, or maybe there's more opportunities in that. But either way, there always has to be a plan B, right? And Eddie Hearn has mentioned before that, you know what? Boxing is not my end-all, be-all. He obviously cares about his family. He has children, nucleus family, things of that nature that he takes care of, and he's on the road a lot, right? So for him to lose all of these fights from his fighters, it would not be the end of the world, because Eddie Hearn has already reached the top. And that is something that I think is very dangerous among promoters and fighters. And I didn't really realize that this is where I was going to take this conversation, but it made it even better. Because when you are at a state where you're comfortable as a fighter and as a promoter, you are really letting yourself in dangerous spots. And let me tell you why. Because you're not going to care as much. You're not going to have the same amount of risk assessment in terms of your skills to differentiate what is what and who is who, and what am I capable of and what am I not capable of. And you also got to take into consideration the ever-existing reality of comfort that, in my opinion, is really the killer of most fighters. Not all. There are guys out there that no matter how much money in the world they have, it will never stop them from being competitive. But I got to tell you, there is a certain difference with having that extra drive where, let's say, people put you down saying that you're never going to be good enough, and then you use that as a motivation, where you have this motivation to show the world that, hey, you know what? I'm going to show you that I can prove you wrong because I got nothing else going on in my life. Those people, I'll tell you, are really the most dangerous and the most effective, and that is what I mean by most dangerous. Right now, Eddie Hearn is not at his most peak moment of being a promoter because right now, let me just say this. He's always had money, right? But then there's more money that's coming in. So now he's incentivized to take these fights that sometimes may not be good for his fighters. And that is the reality of this situation. And that is where I'm going to take this next conversation at, is the fact that the Saudis are buying out everybody to where they are now okay with taking a loss. from a competitive architecture, that is really beautiful. And as a fan, that's what you want to see. But on the human side of fighting, you need to understand that it could be very dangerous for your fighter's long-term health. And that's the reality of it. So I'm going to leave it with this. Understand that in combat sports, there are two realms that people operate in. They operate within the fighters and in their camps, meaning that they have empathy and a human relationship with that person, and they're going to decide their career in that particular matter. And in the other side of that are the fans, who are bloodthirsty, who want nothing more than to build you up, just like what you do as a kid with Lego blocks and all these things, only to go and knock it right back down. Because that is how most humans are built, unfortunately. We like to build them up only to knock them down, and that is what the bloodthirsty fans want to see out of the so-called GOATs that want to leave undisputed and undefeated in their careers. So that is all that I have to say right now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next content to come, inshallah.